Hello and welcome to Greek 1. This is Lesson 5, English Grammar. Just by looking at this first slide and looking at the title, you're probably already wondering, why am I talking or learning about English grammar to learn Greek? That's a great question, and I understand the sentiment. A lot of people probably think, oh no, grammar, that's not my favorite thing in the whole wide world. But as it turns out, in order to learn Greek, we do need to learn a little bit of English grammar, just the basics. We're not going to, take a whole course on it. But we need to know the basics a little bit. And that's because Greek is not just a different language, it's a different kind of language. Sometimes people have the perception that you can just maybe learn the alphabet and hear it out, or maybe just learn vocabulary and that's enough. And it is absolutely not. As you're going to find out, learning Greek vocabulary, what the Greek words are, is just a fraction of what it takes to understand the Greek language. The grammar, the rules behind the language are going to be what really helps you to understand the language. And so in order to learn the Greek rules of the Greek language, it's going to help us to understand a little bit of our language, how it works, so we have something to compare it. So that leads me to my first point, that every language has rules about how that language works. And that's what grammar is. Grammar is the rules behind a language. And just to give you an example, if you go buy a car, you know that you're talking about the blue car. We would put the adjective before the noun, so we would say the blue car. You probably wouldn't say the car blue. That's a no-no. You wouldn't do those backwards. That doesn't make any sense. You know in your head, even if you never really learned grammar, you didn't take grammar in school, you probably know just from everyday communication that you wouldn't flip those around. You know that it's the blue car. And if you were to say the car blue, somebody might understand you. And if you're learning English for the first time, people would maybe let that slide and not necessarily make fun of you or anything like that. But our language, we all know to expect that you would say something like the blue car instead of the car blue. We have rules. Languages have rules as to how they work. And you might not necessarily know them consciously. A lot of the grammatical rules that we're going to cover, these are rules that are subconscious. You know them naturally. You don't have to think about them. They just sound wrong, and you just know it instinctively. I shouldn't say instinctively, but you've learned, because it's your first language, or you've been around it long enough, that you say things a certain way. And so that's what grammar is, and those are the things we have to learn, and that we're going to talk about today. Like I said, we're not going to do a whole course on English grammar. Today, we're just going to talk a little bit about those basic rules, like, you put blue in front of the car and not blue after the car, and that's it. So today we just got a few things we're going to knock out just to get us rolling in our journey to learn Greek. And having said that, I think you'll enjoy it. Most people, even if they're not big fans of grammar, when we just talk about the basics and get into it, people end up liking it. So have a good attitude about it. You're going to be all right. All right, first things first. We're going to talk about subject and verb. This is an oversimplification. If there are grammar nerds listening to this, I understand it is subject and predicate, but give me a break. I wanted to make this as easy as possible for somebody learning this for the first time. Let's talk about subject and verb. All right. The most basic sentence structure, that is, you come up with the most basic sentence you can come up with in the English language, you've got to have a subject and a verb. If you have a subject and you have a verb, you have a sentence. Let me give you an example. Let's say I have a sentence like David runs. That's as simple as it gets. David runs. Well, the subject is the thing that the sentence is talking about. All right. In this case, in this simple sentence, David runs, David is the subject of the sentence. It's think of the subject as the star of the sentence. Like, what are we talking about? Because you can have different things and people and objects, but there's something that is actually the main subject, the star of that sentence, if you will. And the more we practice identifying it, the better you get at identifying the subject in more complicated sentences. But for this very simple one, David runs, the subject is David. Okay. The next thing we got to know is that the verb is the action that the subject is taking. So what is David doing in this sentence? He is running. That means runs is the verb. David is a subject of the sentence, and runs is the verb. Let's look at another sentence. David went to town. Okay, we've got a couple more things in here. So we ask ourselves, all right, what's this subject? What's the subject of the sentence? Who is the star of this sentence? And again, it is David. So David is the subject. Now we got a lot of other stuff here afterwards. What is the action? What is the subject doing? And in this case, it's going to be that he went. So David is a subject of the sentence, and went is the verb. Don't worry about the town for now, to town. That's something else we'll get into later. Right now, we just want to identify the subject. The star of the sentence is David. And then the action is the word went. That's your verb. All right. Now, let's get another example here. I like the chair. So we're going to ask ourselves, what is the subject of this sentence? And if you guessed I, you would be correct. Whoever is speaking, right? That would be the subject of the sentence. I is the thing. Now we've got a chair and we have I, but the chair is not the main star of the sentence. It's a secondary thing. The main subject of the sentence is I, and then you ask yourself, okay, well, what's the action that I is taking? What is I doing? I is liking. So like is the verb. Subject is I, the verb is like, to like. To like something is an action. Okay, running is fun. I wanted to make this one a little more confusing, and I probably shouldn't have. But this is confusing because you look at a word like running and you say that's an action word. It kind of is, but in this sentence, it's actually not. Running here is actually the thing we're talking about in the sentence. If you think about it, we're talking about running. Running is fun. So even though running could, in certain scenarios, be the action, if you ask yourself, what is this sentence talking about? You should be able to see that we're talking about running. So in this case, running is the actual subject. Now, what is the subject running doing? It is, and I picked this one because it's a little confusing, but I want to introduce you to this idea that the verb can be something as simple to be. And so in this case, the subject is the main star of the sentence. It's running. The act of running itself is a subject. And then being is the action that it's doing. It's just being something. What is it being? It's being fun. So the subject is running, and the verb is. And I got another example for you. Okay. He became president. Hopefully now you're getting a little better of identifying the subject, and you're starting to realize that, hey, it tends to come at the beginning of the sentence, and that you would be right. The subject usually comes first. And so here we have he would be the subject of the sentence. And now I'm giving you a chance here to guess at what the verb, the action is. Obviously, president is not a verb. It's not an action. But became is. To become is an action. So became is the verb. And so we're learning that the most basic sentence structure is a subject and a verb. Here's a little more complicated one, and we've already introduced the idea that the subject can sometimes be different things. Well, in this case, the subject is blue. A color is the subject in this sentence. Blue is the subject. Now, what is blue doing? again, the action in this one is pretty simple. Blue is being. So blue is. What is it being? My favorite color. But it is being. At the simplest form of this sentence, it's just the subject verb, blue is. And that would be the sentence. All right. Just to make things a little more complicated, I'm going to give you this long sentence here. Tomorrow night, after church, we're going to the movies with Todd and Amanda to celebrate the running of the Bulls. We just said that the most basic sentence structure is a subject and a verb. That's what we really need. We need a subject and we a verb. Okay? So we're going to look through this, and there's a lot of stuff in here, but if you look carefully, you should find a very simple subject and verb. I'm going to give you a second so you can find it. And if you need more time, you can pause. Okay, hopefully you found it in all of here. All right, what is the subject? The subject is we. Despite all this stuff, and then you actually have Todd and Amanda down here, the subject, the start of the sentence, who is doing what? It is we. We are the subject of the sentence. Now, what is we doing? Well, it's another be. So as complicated or as large as this sentence is, and I use a lot of things to throw you off, like other names and other running, the word running, it sounds like another verb, another action. There's a lot of stuff in here. At the end of the day, the sentence is really just we are. Now, it doesn't even say who we are, but it's, this first section, tomorrow night, that's when are we doing this? After church, more specifically, when are we doing this? We is a subject. Verb is the action. We are. What is the being? Well, we're going. Where are we going? To the movies. With who? With Todd and Amanda. Why? To celebrate the running of the Bulls. All right. All that other stuff is just clarifying we are. At the end of the day, we have a subject and a verb. So you can see how it's going to take a little bit of practice to get this down pat. But ultimately, we're just learning 3 things right now. We're learning that the most basic sentence structure has to have a subject and a verb, at least. The subject is the thing in the sentence, the thing the sentence is talking about, right? The main star of the sentence. And then that the action is the verb. Whatever the subject is doing, that's the verb. And so those are the 3 basic things we're picking up right now. If that doesn't make sense, go back, review this first half of the lecture before moving forward. I want to make sure you get those things down pat. I will give you a couple more examples as we will revisit this as we continue in this lecture. But you do need to make sure you understand those first 3 things. If that does make sense, all right, we can move on to another idea, and that is direct object. Okay, we said that the most basic sentence has subject and a verb, right? So we take a sentence like Amanda hit. All right, we ask ourselves, what's the subject? Who's the sentence about? And we see Amanda. So we put that there. And then we ask ourselves, okay, what is Amanda doing? Well, she hit. And that's our action word. By now, you should probably be noticing that the subject is coming before the verb every single time. That's a huge clue. But now we're going to add something called the direct object. We're going to add this. To this sentence, we're going to now say, Amanda hit the ball. So if Amanda is the subject and the verb is to hit, right? Amanda's the subject of the sentence. That's the star of the sentence. And then the action that the subject is doing is hitting. Then what's ball? Well, the direct object is directly affected by the action. So what we have here is Amanda hit the ball. The ball is the thing directly affected by the action. So if Amanda is doing the action and hitting is the action, then the ball is the thing that is physically getting hit, right? It's directly being hit. So that would be called the direct object. So we've got the subject, Amanda, we've got hit as the verb, and then we have the direct object. So just to recap one more time. So Amanda is the thing that we're talking about in the sentence, the main star of the sentence. That's the subject. Hit is the action that the subject is taking. And then we added the direct object. You don't always have to have a direct object in a sentence. In fact, a lot of times you don't. But if there is something that is being directly affected by the verb, we're going to call that the direct object. Let's get another example. Todd rides the horse. All right, look at the sentence. Ask yourself if you can identify the star of the sentence. Hopefully you're not getting confused by the word horse. Todd is going to be the subject. He's the one doing the action. He's the main star of the sentence. And then you should ask yourself, okay, so what's Todd doing? Well, he is riding, right? He rides, so that's the verb. Now, the horse is a thing being ridden. Todd is a subject, rides is the verb, and the horse is a thing being directly affected by the action. It is the direct object. So Todd is riding the horse. Hopefully this is starting to get clear. Let's look at another example. All right, Ryan hit the ball. We already looked at this. We just changed the subject. Instead of being Amanda, now it's Ryan. Ryan is the subject. What is Ryan doing? He is hitting, and then the ball is being directly affected by the verb, which is going to make it the direct object. So once again, if you have a sentence and you have a noun or something over here that is being directly affected by the verb, then that's going to be your direct object. All right, let's look at this sentence. Andres broke the chair. Okay, so the star of this sentence, the thing we're talking about is specifically Andres. What is Andres doing? He broke. In this sentence, it is past tense, right? Past tense, broke. What was directly affected by the breaking? That's the chair. The chair was directly affected by the breaking. That it's the thing being broken, right? So we're going to say that is the direct object. Hopefully this is becoming clear if you think of examples. All right, let's do a couple more here. Justin opened the door. By now, you should be identifying the subject pretty quickly. Hopefully, you're identifying the subject as Justin, the star of the sentence. What is the subject doing? Well, he's opening the door, so that's the verb. Now you're going to ask yourself, what's happening with the door? Is the door being directly affected by the verb? Is the act of opening happening directly to the door? It is. So the door would be the direct object. Okay, so just to recap, we talked about the most basic sentence of the structure is a subject and a verb. We've done a lot of examples. I think that's becoming clear. The subject is the thing the sentence is talking about. And by the way, it'll get complicated. So it's just because, you're not going to get 100% down in this video. There are going to be a lot of sentences where it gets confusing. But as long as you understand the basics, we're good, right? The subject is the main star of the sentence. What is the sentence talking about? Then you got the verb. What is the action that is being, that the subject is taking, right? And those two things make up a sentence. You got to have those two. We threw in a third thing that a lot of sentences don't have a direct object, but if you have something that is directly affected by the action, that is the action's happening specifically to that object, that is going to be the direct object. So those are the four things we've talked about so far. And I've got one last thing before we call it a day here. Word order tells you what's what. This is how English grammar works. If I have a sentence like Ryan hit Mike, and I ask you the question, who is doing the action? Who's doing the hitting, right? You're going to know that it's Ryan. Ryan is doing the hitting. if I ask you the question, okay, to whom is the action happening? Who's getting hit? You're gonna know that it's Mike. So you'll be able to look at the sentence and you can say, okay, Ryan's doing the action and Mike is receiving, right? That's pretty obvious. You know that even if you've never taken a single, lesson of English grammar. So the question is, how do you know that? How do you know that it's Ryan doing the hitting and not Mike? Well, it's the order of the words. In English, the order of the words tells you what is doing what. The fact that Ryan comes before the verb hit triggers in your brain, okay, he's the one doing the action. Even if you never took a grammar lesson in your life, just naturally, you're going to know that because it comes before the verb, he is doing the action. And because the word Mike comes after the word hit, in your brain, that's going to signal, okay, he's the one doing the action, or he's the one who's getting hit. So if we flip that around, and I ask you again, who's doing the action and to who's the action happening to, you're going to know that now it's backwards, right? Now it's Mike that's doing the action, and we know that because the name Mike comes before the verb hit, and we're going to know that Ryan is the one getting hit because of the word order, right? Because it comes after the verb, then in our brain that signals, okay, Ryan is receiving the action. And that's how it works in English. In English, word order tells us what's what. That's how we know. Well, that's it for today. I just want to review with you, and I think it's okay if this is not super clear, go back and review. I do think this is something you want to have, relatively clear before you move on. But if you're looking at some more complicated sentences and you're not sure, that's okay too, because it'll take a lot of practice to really get this nailed down. But let's just review real quick. We talked about that the most basic sentence structure is a subject and a verb, right? You got to have those two things. The subject is the thing the sentence is talking about, the main star of the sentence. Then you've got the verb, which is the action the subject is taking. And sometimes it's a really action word, right? Like running, jumping. Sometimes it's a little more nuanced, like it's just to be or something like that. But it's the action. And then we added the direct object, and that is the thing directly affected by the action. We don't always have a direct object in every sentence, but if it's an action word like hit or throw or punch or build or whatever, then you could very easily have a direct object, and that's a thing directly affected by the action. And then finally, the last important piece for today is that in English, the word order tells you what's doing what. If you have a noun that comes before the verb, then that's going to be the subject of the sentence. If you have an object that comes afterwards, then that would be the object or something else. But word order tells us what is doing what. Why are we talking about all this? Because that's not how it happens in Greek. And when we get into the next few lessons, you're going to see that it's very, very different. And so you want to have a basic understanding of these little points so that when we get to Greek and then following lessons, you have something to compare to and it makes sense. I hope this is clear. I hope you're getting it. I want to encourage you. Greek is hard. It's going to expand your brain, but it's good for you. So stick with it.